The engagement between Soo-hyun Jang and Malia Cruz is hereby dissolved, he announced, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the room. Malia will marry me instead. That's how this war ends. The church erupted into chaos. People gasped and whispered and shouted over each other. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her face going white as paper. Soo-hyun stepped forward like he wanted to protest, but one look from his brother stopped him cold. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what had just happened. Jae-won turned back to me, closing the distance between us. He reached out and touched my cheek with one scarred finger, his skin rough against mine. See you at the altar, princess. 3 days earlier. The coffin shouldn't have been closed. I stood in the front row, staring at the dark mahogany wood that hid my father's face forever. They said the bullets had done too much damage. They said I wouldn't want to see him like that. But I did want to see him. I wanted to see what they had done to him so I would never forget. The church was packed with bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Everyone who mattered in our world was here, dressed in expensive black suits and designer dresses, whispering prayers they didn't mean. My mother sat beside me, her hand cold and trembling in mine. She hadn't spoken a word since yesterday morning when the police finished questioning her. I scanned the crowd slowly, taking inventory. Friends, enemies, allies, they all looked the same when they were pretending to mourn. But I knew half of them were here just to make sure Papa was really dead. To see the great David Kamau Cruz reduced to nothing but a box and some flowers. David was a devoted father and husband, Pastor Aching said from the altar, his voice echoing off the stone walls. A pillar of our community who will be deeply missed. Liar. Papa was many things, but a pillar of the community wasn't one of them. He was ruthless when he needed to be. He was feared by his enemies and respected by his allies. He built an empire from nothing and ruled it with an iron fist. And he was mine. My protector. My teacher. My whole world. Now he was gone, and I was alone. Someone had killed him 3 nights ago. Shot him 4 times in his own study while I slept peacefully upstairs, dreaming about my wedding dress. By the time I found him the next morning, his blood had soaked deep into the Persian carpet he'd bought for my mother's birthday. There had been a single black rose lying on his mahogany desk, the killer's signature. I knew exactly who left black roses. The heavy church doors creaked open behind us. A ripple of whispers swept through the congregation as everyone turned to look. Through the doorway, I could see a sleek black Genesis parked at the curb. The kind of car only the Jang family drove. My heart started pounding against my ribs. Soo-hyun Jang stepped out first, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people made in 3 months. His dark hair was perfectly styled. He was supposed to be my husband in exactly 14 days. Our marriage would have united the Cruz and Jang families, ending a war that had lasted 20 years and cost dozens of lives. 3 months ago, I dreaded the arrangement. But Soo-hyun had surprised me. He was gentle. I'd begun to think maybe an arranged marriage didn't have to mean a loveless one. Now I didn't know what we were to each other. Soo-hyun walked down the center aisle, his eyes fixed on the marble floor. He wouldn't look at me. When I had tried to call him yesterday after the police left, he hadn't answered. When I tried again this morning, his phone went straight to voicemail. Something was wrong. Soo-hyun had always been cool and distant, but he'd never ignored me completely. Not when my father had just been murdered. But then I saw another figure emerging from the car, and my blood turned to ice. The entire church went dead silent. Jae-won Jang. Soo-hyun's older brother. The prodigal son who had vanished 5 years ago after beating 3 rival soldiers to death with his bare hands in a warehouse. The one they whispered about in dark corners, calling him the devil of soul. The ghost who haunted our nightmares. The one who left black roses at crime scenes. He walked into the sacred space like he owned it, like God himself had invited him personally. His black hair was longer than I remembered, pushed back from a face that could have been carved from stone. A thin scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, new since I'd last seen him. His hands, I noticed, bore old knife wounds that had never healed properly, leaving white lines across his knuckles. Everyone moved out of his way instinctively, pressing against the pews like he carried some invisible disease. Even the old women who had known him since childhood crossed themselves as he passed. He stopped directly in front of my father's coffin. The silence stretched so tight I thought it might snap. My mother's fingernails dug into my palm. J1 reached slowly into his jacket. I held my breath, half expecting him to pull out a gun and finish whatever he'd started 3 nights ago. Instead, he withdrew a single black rose, its petals dark as midnight, and placed it gently on top of the polished casket. The same signature. The exact same flower that had been waiting on Papa's desk. Hot rage exploded through my chest. I shot to my feet so fast my chair scraped loudly against the stone floor, the sound echoing through the sanctuary like a gunshot. You killed my father. My voice cut through the silence. Every head in the church turned toward me, but I only had eyes for J1. He looked up from the coffin slowly, his dark eyes finding mine. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look guilty or ashamed. He looked hungry. Like a predator that had just spotted its next meal. Did I? He asked. His voice was low and rough. It sent an unwelcome shiver down my spine. You left your calling card. Everyone knows the black rose belongs to you. He took a step closer to me. I should have backed away, every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to run. But I planted my feet and lifted my chin. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me afraid. If I had killed your father, Malia, he said, my name rolling off his tongue, I wouldn't have left a rose. His eyes burned into mine, holding me captive. That's not a warning. It's a message. What message? I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen. He turned away from me and faced the congregation. Every person in the church held their breath, waiting to see what the devil would do next. The engagement between Soo-hyun Jang and Malia Cruz is hereby dissolved, he announced, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the room. Malia will marry me instead. That's how this war ends. The church erupted into chaos. People gasped and whispered and shouted over each other. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her face going white as paper. Soo-hyun stepped forward like he wanted to protest, but one look from his brother stopped him cold. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what had just happened. J1 turned back to me, closing the distance between us. He reached out and touched my cheek with one scarred finger, his skin rough against mine. See you at the altar, princess. Then he walked out of the church like he hadn't just blown my entire world to pieces. Everything is swapped in cleanly. How does it feel? The ride home from the cemetery passed in complete silence. I sat in the back of our black sedan, watching the city pass through tinted windows. My mother hadn't said a word since we'd left the church. Her hands were folded in her lap, perfectly still, but I could see the way her jaw clenched every few seconds. She was thinking about J1's announcement. We all were. When we pulled through the iron gates of the Cruz estate, I noticed the extra security. Men I didn't recognize stood at the entrance, their suits bulging with weapons. More guards patrolled the gardens. Papa's death had made everyone paranoid. The car stopped in front of our Mediterranean-style mansion. Home sweet home, if you could call a fortress home. 23 rooms, bulletproof windows, and enough surveillance cameras to run a small television network. I climbed out without waiting for the driver and marched straight through the front doors. My heels clicked against the marble floors as I headed for Papa's office, the one place in this house where I'd always found answers. Malia, wait. My mother's voice stopped me at the bottom of the staircase. I turned to face her. Elena Cruz was still a beautiful woman at 45, with the same dark hair and warm brown skin I'd inherited. But today she looked older, more fragile. The past 3 days had aged her years. We need to talk, she said quietly. Yes, we do. I crossed my arms. Starting with why you didn't look surprised when J1 made his little announcement. Her face went pale. That told me everything I needed to know. You knew, I said, my voice rising. You knew he was going to do that. Malia, please. Let's go to the sitting room. No. I want answers now. Right here. I stepped closer to her, studying her face. How long have you known Papa was dead before I found him? She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not. And don't lie to me. I can always tell when you're lying. My mother looked around nervously, checking to make sure we were alone. Then she grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the sitting room anyway. The moment she closed the door behind us, she seemed to crumble. She sank into Papa's favorite leather chair and buried her face in her hands. They came to me 2 days ago, she whispered. Who came to you? The elders. Your Uncle Kwame, Tobias, Samuel. All of them. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. They said there would be more bloodshed if we didn't act quickly. More families would get involved. More people would die. So you decided to auction me off to the highest bidder? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Mama? I knelt in front of her chair, forcing her to look at me. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like that. She took a shaky breath. J1 came to them with a proposition. He said he would take responsibility for your father's death. So he did kill him. And that marrying you would end the violence once and for all. She ignored my interruption. The families would be united. The war would be over. I stood up so fast the room spun. Are you listening to yourself? You're talking about handing me over to Papa's murderer. The alternative is more death, Malia. More funerals. Do you want that? What I want is justice for my father. I shouted. What I want is to put a bullet in Jae-won Jang's head. My mother stood up and grabbed my shoulders. And what do you think will happen after you pull that trigger? Do you think his family will just let it go? Do you think Soo-hyun will protect you? The mention of Soo-hyun's name hit me like a physical blow. I thought about the way he'd avoided my eyes at the funeral, the way he'd stepped back when Jae-won appeared. Soo-hyun would never let this happen, I said, but even I could hear the doubt in my voice. Soo-hyun is the second son, Malia. He has no power in this. Jae-won is the heir now. Since when? He's been gone for 5 years. Since he came back 3 days ago and reminded everyone why they used to fear him. A chill ran down my spine. What did he do? Before my mother could answer, there was a sharp knock at the sitting room door. We both froze. Come in, my mother called, straightening her shoulders. Uncle Kwame entered, followed by 3 other men I recognized as senior members of our family's organization. They all looked grim. Elena. Malia. Kwame nodded to each of us in turn. We need to discuss the arrangements. What arrangements? I demanded. For your wedding. It's been moved up. The room started spinning again. Moved up to when? Saturday. Saturday? I stared at him. That's 4 days from now. The longer we wait, the more unstable things become, Kwame explained in that calm, rational tone he used when he was about to ruin someone's life. Jae-won wants this done quickly, and frankly, so do we. I haven't agreed to anything. You don't have a choice, Malia. The words came from Tobias, a thin man with cold eyes who'd always made my skin crawl. Your father is dead. Your family needs protection. This marriage provides that. Protection from who? Jae-won? Protection from everyone, Kwame said quietly. There are already 3 families circling like vultures, waiting to see if we'll survive David's death. Without an alliance, we're vulnerable. I looked around the room at these men who had served my father faithfully for years. Now they were serving me up on a silver platter to save their own skins. Get out, I said quietly. Malia. Get out. I screamed. All of you. Get out of my house. They exchanged glances but didn't move. This is still my father's house, I continued, my voice shaking with rage. And until I'm dragged to some altar, I'm still his daughter. So get out before I have you thrown out. Kwame sighed. We'll give you some time to process this. But the decision has been made, Malia. We're sorry. They filed out one by one, leaving me alone with my mother. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, baby. But we don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not for people like us. You know that. I did know that. I'd grown up knowing that my life would never really be my own, that someday I'd be married off to secure an alliance or settle a debt. I just never thought it would be to the man who killed my father. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Maria, our housekeeper, peeked her head through the door. Miss Malia? There's a delivery for you. What kind of delivery? Wedding dress. And some other things. My blood turned to ice. From who? The card just says, J. Of course it did. I followed Maria upstairs to my bedroom, my mother trailing behind us. On my bed sat 3 large white boxes tied with black ribbon. A small white card was attached to the largest box. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and read. A queen doesn't wear white. You'll wear blood. J. I lifted the lid of the first box. Inside was the most beautiful and terrifying wedding dress I'd ever seen. It was deep wine red, the color of fresh blood, made from what looked like the finest silk. The bodice was fitted with delicate black lace detail, and the skirt would flow like liquid fire. It was perfect. And I hated it. The second box contained shoes, jewelry, and undergarments, all in the same dark theme. The third box held a black leather jacket with a note, for the honeymoon. It's beautiful, my mother whispered, touching the dress reverently. It's a cage. I walked to my bedroom window and looked out at the gardens where I'd played as a child. In 4 days, I'd be married to Jaewon Jang, the man who destroyed my family. But as I stood there, staring at my reflection in the glass, a new thought occurred to me. Jaewon thought he was getting a helpless victim. He thought he was gaining a prize. He had no idea that he was actually getting his executioner. I turned back to my mother, who was still admiring the dress. You're right, Mama. I don't have a choice about the wedding. I walked over to the dress and ran my fingers along the silk. But what happens after Saturday? That's entirely up to me. My mother looked up at me with worry in her eyes. What do you mean? I smiled, but it felt cold. I mean Jaewon Jang wants to marry me? Fine. Let him. But he's going to learn that some prizes aren't worth winning. The devil wanted a bride? He was about to get one hell of a wife. I woke up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows. My wedding day. The blood-red dress hung on my closet door. I stared at it for a long moment, my stomach twisting into knots. In 6 hours, I would belong to Jaewon Jang. I slipped out of bed and walked to my dressing table. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath old jewelry boxes, I found what I was looking for. Papa's letter opener. What are you doing? My mother's voice made me jump. She stood in the doorway wearing a black dress. Even for my own wedding, she was dressed for mourning. Nothing. I slipped the letter opener into my robe pocket. Just thinking. She walked over and sat on my bed. We don't have to do this, Malia. We could run. Leave the city tonight. And go where? You think Jaewon wouldn't find us? I shook my head. This is the only way to end it. By marrying your father's killer? By getting close enough to make him pay. Her face went white. Don't even think about it. If you try anything. What? He'll kill me? I laughed bitterly. Mama, I'm already dead. The moment I walk down that aisle, Malia Cruz dies. All that's left is deciding whether Mrs. Jang will be a victim or a weapon. She was quiet for a long time. Then she stood up and kissed my forehead. Your father would be proud of you. No. Papa would have found another way. I looked at myself in the mirror. But Papa's not here. So this is what we have. An hour later, I was sitting in front of my dressing table while Maria did my hair. The letter opener was now hidden in my garter, pressed against my thigh. Every time I shifted, I felt the cool metal reminding me that I wasn't completely helpless. A knock on my bedroom door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting my mother. Instead, Soo-hyun Jang stepped into my room. He looked terrible. His hair was messy, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept either. Soo-hyun. Maria looked between us nervously. Miss Malia is getting ready for. Leave us alone, he said quietly. Maria glanced at me. I nodded, and she hurried out, closing the door behind her. Soo-hyun and I stared at each other in silence. 3 days ago, he was supposed to be my husband. Now he was about to become my brother-in-law. You look beautiful, he said finally. Don't. Malia, I need you to know. He ran his hands through his hair. I tried to stop this. I went to my father's advisors, to the other families. No one would listen. Because your brother scares them. Because my brother owns them. Soo-hyun stepped closer. Jae-won didn't just come back to claim you. He came back to take control of everything. Our family, your family, the entire operation. I turned to face him fully. Are you trying to warn me about something I don't already know? I'm trying to tell you that Jae-won has been obsessed with you since we were teenagers. His voice was barely a whisper. Before he left, he used to watch you at family gatherings. He knew everything about you. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying this isn't just about revenge for our father's death. Jae-won wanted you long before David was killed. The room suddenly felt too small. Then who? I don't know who killed your father. But I know my brother, and when Jae-won wants something, he takes it. No matter what he has to destroy to get it. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. Why are you telling me this? Because in 2 hours, you're going to be trapped in his house with no way out. Soo-hyun reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver phone. This number will reach me directly. If you need help, if he hurts you, call me. I took the phone and slipped it into my bra. Why would you help me? Because you were supposed to be mine. Because He stopped himself. Because someone needs to protect you from him. I don't need protection. I need revenge. Malia, please. Don't try to fight Jae-won head-on. He's not like other men. He's not even like other criminals. He's something else entirely. What do you mean? Before Soo-hyun could answer, my bedroom door burst open. Jae-won walked in like he owned the place. Brother. His voice was deadly calm. I thought I told you to stay away from my bride. Soo-hyun went pale but didn't back down. You were just leaving. Jae-won's eyes never left Soo-hyun's face. Weren't you? The tension in the room was suffocating. For a moment, I thought Soo-hyun might actually stand up to his brother. Then his shoulders sagged in defeat. Take care of yourself, Malia, he said quietly, and walked out. Jae-won watched him go, then turned to me with a smile that made my skin crawl. You look stunning in red. Like you were born to wear it. What do you want? To escort my bride to church, of course. He walked over to my vanity and picked up my perfume bottle, inhaling the scent. Can't have you running away before the ceremony. I'm not going anywhere. No. You're not. He set the perfume down and reached into his jacket. I brought you a wedding gift. He pulled out a small black box and placed it on my vanity. Inside was my father's signet ring, the one he'd worn every day of his life. The one that should have been buried with him. Where did you get this? My voice came out as a whisper. I took it off his finger. Jae-won's voice was casual, like he was discussing the weather. Right after I put 4 bullets in his chest. The world stopped spinning. You admit it. To you? Always. He stepped closer until I could smell his cologne. I want you to know exactly who you're marrying, princess. I want you to understand what you're getting into. Why? The word came out strangled. Because honesty is important in a marriage. His hand touched my cheek, the same way it had at the funeral. Your father killed mine when I was 12 years old. I spent 15 years planning my revenge. And you, beautiful Malia, are the final piece. I should have been terrified. I should have been crying or begging or trying to run. Instead, I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Is that all I am to you? Revenge? His thumb brushed across my bottom lip. Oh no, sweetheart. You're so much more than that. What else? You're mine. His voice dropped to a whisper. You've been mine since the moment I first saw you at your 18th birthday party. You just didn't know it yet. Soo-hyun had been right. This wasn't just about my father. The car is waiting, Jae-won said, stepping back. Time to go become Mrs. Jang. He walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Malia? Whatever Soo-hyun gave you, I'd throw it away if I were you. Phones can be traced. And I don't like my wife talking to other men. He left me alone with my father's ring and the terrible understanding that I was walking into something much worse than an arranged marriage. I was walking into a trap that had been 20 years in the making. But as I slipped the ring onto my finger and checked that the letter opener was still secure against my thigh, I smiled. Jae-won thought he was getting his ultimate prize. He had no idea he was about to marry his own destruction. The church looked exactly the same as it had 3 days ago for Papa's funeral. Same people in the same benches. Same flowers decorating the altar. The only difference was that today, everyone was pretending to celebrate instead of mourn. Jae-won's hand was firm on my arm as we walked down the aisle together. No father to give me away. Just the devil escorting his prize to the altar. I could feel every pair of eyes in the church watching us. Some looked curious, others terrified. A few of the older women crossed themselves as we passed, like they were witnessing something unholy. They weren't wrong. When we reached the front, Jae-won turned to face me. In the stained glass light, his scar looked even more pronounced. A reminder that he was dangerous in ways I was only beginning to understand. Pastor Aching looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. His hands shook as he opened his Bible. Dearly beloved, he began, his voice barely steady. We are gathered here today to witness the union of Jae-won Jang and Malia Cruz. I tuned out most of his speech about love and commitment. None of it applied to what was happening here. This wasn't a wedding. It was a business transaction wrapped in white lies and red silk. Do you, Jae-won Jang, take Malia Cruz to be your lawfully wedded wife? Pastor Aching asked. Jae-won's dark eyes locked onto mine. I claim Malia as mine, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the church. To possess and protect, to own and worship, until death separates us. Those weren't the traditional vows. But then again, Jae-won had never been traditional. And do you, Malia Cruz, take Jae-won Jang to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was it. My last chance to run, to scream, to tell everyone what he'd done to my father. Instead, I lifted my chin and looked directly into the eyes of my father's killer. I vow to remember every sin you've committed against my family, I said clearly. I vow to stand by your side until I can make you pay for each one. And I promise that death will be a mercy you'll beg for before I'm done with you. Gasps echoed through the church. Someone in the back actually laughed. Pastor Aching looked like he might faint. Jae-won's smile was sharp as a blade. Perfect, he murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. The rings? Pastor Aching squeaked. Jae-won reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 platinum bands. He slipped one onto my finger, his touch burning against my skin. When it was my turn, I took his hand and slid the ring into place. His fingers were warm and I wondered how many people he'd killed with these hands. You may kiss the bride, Pastor Aching said, though he looked like he regretted the words immediately. Jae-won's hands cupped my face, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones. Then his mouth crashed against mine. The kiss was claiming and fierce and completely wrong. It tasted like danger and promises I never wanted to hear. When his tongue swept across my bottom lip, something twisted low in my stomach that I absolutely refused to name. I bit down hard. He pulled back with blood on his lip and hunger in his eyes. Careful, wife, he whispered against my mouth. Save some fight for the honeymoon. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers, though most of it sounded forced. Jae-won kept my hand in his as we walked back down the aisle, his grip possessive. The reception was held in the church hall, decorated with blood-red roses that matched my dress. Everyone came to congratulate us. Kissing my cheek and shaking Jaewon's hand like this was a normal wedding between two people who actually loved each other. Such a beautiful bride, Mrs. Akinyi cooed, the same woman who'd whispered prayers over my father's coffin. Thank you, I replied with a smile that felt like glass. And Jaewon, you look so handsome. Just like your father did at his wedding. Jaewon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Akinyi. She moved on, and I filed away that reaction. Any mention of his father bothered him. Good to know. The next hour passed in a blur of fake congratulations and forced smiles. Jaewon played his part perfectly, the devoted new husband who couldn't keep his hands off his bride. Every touch made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to smile and play along. I need some air, I finally told him when I couldn't take another second of pretending. Don't go far, he said. We have a schedule to keep. I made my way toward the bathroom, nodding and smiling at people along the way. The hallway was empty, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. I splashed cold water on my face, careful not to ruin my makeup. In the mirror, I looked like a stranger. I was Mrs. Jaewon Jang now. The thought made me sick. I stayed a few minutes then headed back toward the reception. Footsteps echoed behind me in the empty hallway. I turned, expecting to see Jaewon coming to drag me back to the party. Instead, Soo-hyun stepped out of the shadows. We need to talk, he said urgently. What are you doing? Jaewon will. Jaewon is distracted. Listen to me. He grabbed my shoulders. I need to speak to you. I looked at him hesitantly. I'm listening. Not here. Come with me. Just for a few minutes. No. I stepped back. Soo-hyun, I can't. Jaewon will notice if I'm gone too long. This is important. Then tell me here. I can't. There are too many people. His grip on my shoulders tightened. Just trust me. I said no. I tried to pull away from him. Whatever you want to tell me can wait. His face changed then. The gentle expression melted away, replaced by something colder. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Before I could ask what he meant, his hand clamped over my mouth and nose with a cloth that smelled like chemicals. I struggled against his strong arm, trying to scream, but the sound was muffled. Don't fight it, he whispered in my ear. This will be easier if you don't fight. The world started spinning. My legs gave out as darkness pulled me under. I woke up to darkness. Not the soft darkness of sleep, but the cold, suffocating kind that pressed against your eyes and told you something was very wrong. My head felt like it had been split open and stitched back together badly. My wrists were bound behind me, the rope biting into my skin every time I moved. I forced myself to stay still and breathe. Think, Malia. Think. The floor beneath me was concrete. Cold and damp. The air smelled like motor oil and something metallic that I didn't want to identify. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped in a steady rhythm. A warehouse maybe, or a basement. I opened my eyes slowly. The room was lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Crates were stacked against the walls. Two men I didn't recognize stood near a heavy metal door, speaking to each other in low voices. They hadn't noticed I was awake yet. I flexed my fingers carefully, testing the rope. Tight, but not perfect. Whoever had tied it wasn't expecting their prisoner to know what they were doing. Papa had made sure I knew what I was doing. Thank you, Papa. I shifted slowly, working my wrists back and forth in tiny movements, feeling for any give in the knot. My garter was still in place. I could feel the letter opener pressing against my thigh like a promise. The metal door swung open. Soo-hyun walked in wearing a different suit than he'd had on at the reception. He'd changed. He'd planned this down to the last detail. The gentle, sad-eyed man who had pressed a phone into my hand this morning was completely gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize at all. His posture was different, his expression emptied of everything warm. He looked at me the way my father's enemies used to look at things they wanted to own. You're awake, he said, crouching down to my level. Good. I was getting impatient. Soo-hyun. I kept my voice steady. What is this? This is the part where things get honest between us. He tilted his head, studying me like I was something interesting he'd found. I've been patient for a very long time, Malia. Longer than you know. Patient about what? About you. He reached out and touched a strand of hair that had fallen across my face, tucking it back with unsettling gentleness. Do you know how difficult it was, watching my brother claim you like that? Standing there while he put his ring on your finger? Something cold settled in my stomach. You wanted to marry me. I was always supposed to marry you. His voice hardened. The arrangement was mine first. My idea. I went to your father 18 months ago with the proposal. He agreed. Everything was in place. Then why? Because Jae-won came back. The name came out of his mouth like something bitter. He walked back in after 5 years and took everything I'd built. Just like he always has. My father's respect. My position in the family. And then you. I stared at him. You killed my father. The words landed in the silence like a stone dropped into still water. Soo-hyun smiled. It was nothing like the smile I'd seen at family gatherings, the careful charming one he'd used to make me think he was safe. This one was sharp and cold and completely honest. Your father was going to tell Jae-won the truth about who proposed the arrangement first. He was going to tell him it was my idea, that I'd been building an alliance with the Cruz family behind Jae-won's back for over a year. He stood up and straightened his jacket. I couldn't allow that. So you shot him 4 times and left a black rose to frame your own brother. Jae-won's reputation made it easy. Everyone already believed he was capable of it. Soo-hyun shrugged. He practically framed himself. The rope gave slightly. I kept my expression neutral, kept him talking. And the phone you gave me this morning? The warnings about Jae-won? Insurance. If you trusted me, you'd come to me when things got difficult. And if things got difficult enough, you might have done my work for me. He looked almost impressed with himself. You were always going to be useful, Malia. One way or another. You're insane. I'm thorough. He crouched back down, his face level with mine. Here's what happens now. You're going to help me convince the remaining Cruz elders that Jae-won is unfit to lead. That he kidnapped you on your wedding night and threatened your life. With your testimony and your family's support, I take control of both organizations. And if I refuse? His eyes didn't change. Then I start with your mother. The rope gave another fraction. Almost there. You'd kill your own alliance. I'd build a new one. You're valuable, Malia, but you're not irreplaceable. He stood again and checked his watch. I'll give you some time to think about it. We have until morning before anyone starts asking serious questions. He nodded to the 2 guards and moved toward the door. Soo-hyun. My voice stopped him. When Jae-won finds out what you've done, and he will find out, there won't be anywhere on this earth you can hide. He paused with his hand on the door. Jae-won won't find anything. He'll be too busy trying to convince everyone he didn't kidnap his own bride on their wedding night. He walked out. The door clanged shut behind him. The moment his footsteps faded, I went to work on the rope in earnest. 3 floors above the warehouse, in a black Genesis with the engine running, Jae-won Jang stared at the building's entrance. He'd known from the moment Soo-hyun slipped away from the reception. He'd had his brother watched for months, ever since the evidence had started pointing in a direction he hadn't wanted to believe. His own brother. He pressed his thumb against the screen of his phone, pulling up the tracker he'd had placed on the silver phone Soo-hyun gave Malia that morning. He'd known about the phone. He'd let it happen because it meant he could find her no matter where Soo-hyun took her. She's on the lower level, his head of security, Park, said from the driver's seat. Heat's signatures show 2 guards at the door and 1 other person in the room with her. Soo-hyun just left. Jae-won's voice was flat. How many in the building total? 6. Maybe 7. 6 to 1 odds. He'd faced worse. He reached into the back seat for his jacket. I want Soo-hyun followed, not stopped. I need to know who else he's been talking to before we move on him. And the men inside? Jae-won checked his weapon and pushed open the car door. They shouldn't have touched my wife. I had one wrist free when the shooting started. 3 shots. Then 2 more. Then silence. The guards near the door drew their weapons and positioned themselves on either side. I used the distraction to work the rope off my second wrist, my fingers clumsy and numb. The moment my hands were free, I reached under my dress and pulled out the letter opener. It wasn't much. But it was something. The metal door exploded inward. Jae-won stepped through the smoke and darkness like he'd walked out of every nightmare I'd ever had about him. His jacket was gone. There was blood on his white shirt that I was fairly certain wasn't his. His eyes swept the room once, taking inventory with a coldness that made the guards take an involuntary step back. Then his gaze landed on me. Something shifted in his expression. Just for a fraction of a second, something that looked almost like relief broke through the ice before he locked it away again. The guards raised their weapons. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. Jae-won moved like violence was his first language, like he'd been born knowing exactly how much force was required for every situation. When it was over, both guards were on the floor and Jae-won was standing in the center of the room breathing steadily, not even winded. He turned to me. I was on my feet, back against the wall, letter opener still gripped in my hand. We stared at each other. You came, I said, because it was the only thing my brain could produce. You're my wife. He said it simply, like it explained everything. I have a weapon. His eyes dropped to the letter opener. Something moved across his face that in another lifetime I might have called amusement. I can see that. I'm not putting it down. I know. He held out his hand, not for the letter opener, but for me. We need to leave before Soo-hyun sends more men. Can you walk? I looked at his outstretched hand. This morning I had stood at an altar and vowed revenge against this man. I had spent every moment since planning how to make him pay for my father's death. But Soo-hyun's voice was still ringing in my ears. Your father was going to tell Jae-won the truth. I didn't take his hand. But I pushed off the wall and walked toward the door. I can walk, I said. He fell into step beside me without another word, positioning himself between me and every shadow in that corridor, his body a wall between me and whatever came next. I didn't know what to make of that. I didn't know what to make of any of it. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small and cautious thought was beginning to form. A thought I wasn't ready to say out loud yet, wasn't ready to even fully think. What if I'd been wrong about everything? I buried it quickly. Old habits die hard. But it had been there. And now I couldn't completely unfind it. The drive back was silent. I sat in the back seat of the Genesis, staring at the city lights bleeding past the window. Jae-won sat beside me, not touching, not speaking. Just present in that way he had, filling up space without trying. Park drove without being told where to go. Apparently everyone knew except me. Where are we going? I asked. My house. Jae-won's voice was quiet. It's the safest place right now. Safest for who? He turned to look at me. In the passing streetlights his scar caught the light, that thin line running from temple to jaw that I'd spent days cataloging as evidence of how dangerous he was. For you, he said simply. I turned back to the window. His house turned out to be a sleek modern building set behind high walls in a quiet part of the city. Nothing like the Cruz estate with its Mediterranean columns and ornate gates. This place was minimal and severe and somehow more intimidating for it. Inside was the same. Clean lines, dark furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city like a watchtower. Everything precisely where it needed to be. Nothing wasted. It looked like a man who had learned not to get attached to things. A woman I didn't recognize met us at the door, her eyes taking in my torn dress and rope-marked wrists without any visible reaction. I'll prepare the guest room, she said. The main room, Jae-won said. She nodded and disappeared. I rounded on him. I'm not sleeping in your room. You're sleeping in the room with the reinforced door and the panic button beside the bed. He walked past me toward the kitchen. But call it whatever makes you comfortable. I followed him because I didn't know where else to go. He moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, filling a glass with water and setting it on the counter in front of me. Then he opened a cabinet and produced a first aid kit. "Sit," he said, nodding to the stool. "I'm fine. Your wrists are bleeding." I looked down. He was right. The rope had done more damage than I'd realized. 2 thin lines of red circled each wrist where I'd worked myself free. I sat. He pulled up a stool across from me and opened the kit without a word. His hands were careful as he cleaned the abrasions, his touch completely different from what I expected. No roughness. No possessiveness. Just quiet, methodical care. I watched his face while he worked. The hard lines of it, the scar, the dark eyes focused on the task. I had memorized this face as the face of my enemy. I had fallen asleep planning what I would do to it. Now I didn't know what I was looking at. "Soo-hyun told me things," I said. "I know. He said my father was going to tell you about the arrangement. That it was Soo-hyun's idea first." I paused. "Is that true?" Jae-won's hand stilled for just a moment. Then he continued wrapping my wrist. "Yes. So you knew Soo-hyun had motive?" I suspected. "For about 4 months. He set down the bandage and moved to my other wrist. I didn't have proof until 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago. Before the funeral. Before any of this started. "Then why didn't you?" I stopped myself. "Why didn't I what?" "Go to the authorities?" A short humorless sound escaped him. "Go to your family's elders? Tell them the son of the Jang family murdered the head of the Cruz family and hope they believe me over their own grief?" I didn't have an answer for that. "Soo-hyun had spent 18 months building relationships with everyone around you," Jae-won continued. "He was careful and patient and very good at making people trust him. By the time your father died, half your organization already loved him." He finished wrapping my second wrist and sat back. The only way to draw him out was to give him a reason to move. Something cold began to settle in my chest. A dawning understanding that I really didn't want to have. "The announcement at the funeral," I said slowly. "Claiming me. The forced marriage." Jae-won said nothing. "You did it on purpose. You took me away from him before he could use the engagement to get what he wanted." I stared at him. "You made yourself the villain so he'd have to come out of the shadows to get to me." Still nothing. But he didn't look away. "You let me hate you." My voice came out strange. "You stood there while I accused you of killing my father in front of everyone and you just..." I broke off. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" "Because you would have gone after him yourself." His voice was flat but certain. "You would have confronted him before I had everything in place and he would have killed you, Malia. He'd already killed your father. You were never going to be safe as long as Soo-hyun thought he could use you. So you decided to make that choice for me. I decided to keep you alive." Something shifted in his expression, a tightening around his eyes. "I know that's not what you wanted. I know you wanted the chance to fight your own battles. But I couldn't." He stopped. The silence stretched between us. "Couldn't what?" I asked quietly. He stood up and began putting the first aid kit away. "The housekeeper will show you to your room. You should sleep." Just like that the door closed. Whatever had been about to come through it was locked away again behind that careful controlled expression. I slid off the stool and stood there for a moment, looking at his back. "Jae-won." He turned. "The confession. In my room this morning." The words felt strange in my mouth. "You told me you killed my father. You told me you'd planned it for 15 years. His jaw tightened. "Yes. Was any of it true?" A long pause. "My father was killed by David Cruz when I was 12 years old." His voice was very quiet. "That part was true. I spent years angry enough to burn the whole world down over it. That was true too." "And my father? Did you?" "No." The word was simple and absolute. "I did not kill your father, Malia. I had known it was coming. I had felt it building since the warehouse, Since Soo-hyun's careful confession, since Jae-won had walked through that door and the first thing he'd done was check if I could walk. But hearing it said out loud still knocked the air out of me. The ring, I whispered. You had his ring. I found it in Soo-hyun's car 2 weeks ago. I took it because I knew I'd need proof eventually. He met my eyes. I'm sorry I used it the way I did. I needed you to believe I was exactly what everyone said I was. I looked down at my bandaged wrists. At my father's ring still sitting on my finger next to Jae-won's platinum band. I had walked into that church this morning with a letter opener strapped to my thigh and murder in my heart. I had stood at an altar and promised a man revenge for sins he hadn't committed. I vowed to destroy you, I said. I know. In front of everyone. I remember. I was there. Something about the dry delivery of it cracked something open in my chest. A sound escaped me that was almost a laugh, which felt insane given everything, but there it was. Jae-won looked at me like he wasn't sure what to do with that sound. What happens now? I asked. Now we deal with Soo-hyun. His voice shifted back to that cool certainty. Park is tracking him. By morning I'll know everyone he's been working with and we can move. We? I looked up at him. Something that might have been the beginning of a real expression crossed his face. You said you didn't need protection. You needed revenge. I stared at him. Your words, he said. I know what I said. Then get some sleep, Malia. Tomorrow we finish this together. He walked out of the kitchen and left me standing there in a blood-red wedding dress with bandaged wrists and a head full of everything I thought I knew unraveling thread by thread. Tomorrow we would go after Soo-hyun. Tomorrow there would be a reckoning. But tonight, alone in Jae-won Jang's kitchen, I let myself admit the thing I'd been burying since the warehouse. I had pointed my rage at the wrong man. And the right man had walked into a burning building to bring me home anyway. I pressed my fingers against the platinum band on my finger and didn't take it off. I didn't sleep. I lay in the center of the large bed in Jae-won's room, still in my wedding dress because I had nothing else to wear, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed quietly outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The room smelled like him. Something dark and clean that I had spent 4 days cataloging as threatening and now couldn't decide what to do with. I thought about my father. Not the version of him that had existed in the past 4 days, the body in the closed coffin, the blood in the Persian carpet, the signet ring passed between hands like evidence. I thought about the real one. The man who used to bring me hot chocolate when I had nightmares. Who taught me to play chess at age 6 and never let me win until I actually deserved to. Who built an empire with his bare hands and still made it home for dinner every night. Who had also, apparently, killed a 12-year-old boy's father. That was the part one kept getting stuck on. I was still lying there when the door opened quietly. I sat up. Jae-won stood in the doorway. He'd changed out of his bloody shirt into a plain dark one, his hair slightly less controlled than it had been. He looked almost human. Park found him, he said. Soo-hyun is at a property on the east side. One of 3 families he's been meeting with in secret. Which families? He told me. 2 of the names I recognized as longtime allies of my father. The third made my stomach drop. Uncle Kwame, I said flatly. He was approached 6 months ago. From what Park can tell, he agreed 3 months back. I closed my eyes. The man who had sat in my sitting room yesterday and told me the decision had been made. Who had looked at me with what I thought was regret. How many people has Soo-hyun been running? I asked. Enough. Jae-won moved into the room and sat in the chair by the window, forearms resting on his knees. He's been building this for 2 years, Malia. Your father's death wasn't impulsive. It was the final piece of a very long plan. Just like yours. He met my eyes. Yes. Just like mine. The honesty of it was startling. No deflection, no softening. Just the clean admission of what he was and what he'd intended. Tell me, I said. Everything. From the beginning. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the city breathed and hummed. Then he leaned back in the chair and began. My father's name was Hanjun Jang. He was not a good man, but he was my father, and I was 12 years old when David Cruz had him killed over a territory dispute that could have been settled a dozen other ways. His voice was even, like he'd made peace with the facts if not the feeling. I grew up inside that anger. It became the thing I organized my entire life around. The warehouse, I said quietly. 5 years ago. The three men. They were the ones who carried out the order. The ones who pulled the trigger on my father. He said it without apology. I don't expect you to be comfortable with that. I'm not. I paused. But I understand it. Something shifted in his expression at that. I left after because I knew if I stayed I would go straight for David next. And I wasn't ready. I needed to be certain, needed to build something that would last beyond one act of revenge. He looked at his hands. I spent 5 years making sure that when I came back with enough to end it properly. And Soo-hyun? Soo-hyun reached out to me 8 months ago. Told me he wanted to broker peace between our families. Said he had an arrangement in mind. A humorless sound. I was suspicious, but I listened. He told me about the proposal he'd made to your father, the marriage alliance, the united organization. It sounded almost reasonable. But Soo-hyun has always been very good at sounding reasonable. Jae-won's jaw tightened. 3 months ago one of my men intercepted a communication that didn't fit. A conversation between Soo-hyun and one of your father's senior men, discussing what would happen to the Cruz organization once David was gone. The air left the room. He was already planning it, I said. He'd been planning it since before he ever came to me. The peace proposal, the marriage arrangement, reaching out to me after 5 years, it was all positioning. He needed me back in the city so that when David was killed, I was already present and already carrying 15 years of motive. Jae-won looked at me steadily. He needed a ready-made suspect. I thought about Soo-hyun's face in that warehouse. The cold smile, the careful satisfaction of a man who had moved all his pieces exactly where he wanted them. He used you, I said. He tried to. Something cold and certain moved across Jae-won's face. I spent the next 3 months building a case. Gathering evidence, tracking his meetings, identifying everyone he'd turned. When your father died I knew it was him, but I didn't have enough yet to move. So you moved on me instead. I needed Soo-hyun to believe his plan was working. That I'd taken the bait, claimed you as revenge, given him exactly the chaos he needed to step into. He paused. I also needed you somewhere I could see you. Because I was a target. Because you were going to go after whoever you thought killed your father and get yourself killed in the process. His voice was quiet but certain. You are exactly like David in that way. Fearless to the point of being dangerous to yourself. I didn't know whether to be insulted or not. You could have told me. The morning of the wedding Soo-hyun's men were watching your house. If you'd known the truth your face would have shown it and he would have known I'd told you. He held my gaze. I needed you angry at me, Malia. Genuinely. Your rage at the altar, your resistance, all of it had to be real or Soo-hyun would have seen through it. I sat with that for a long moment. He had stood in my bedroom and confessed to killing my father knowing it would destroy any chance of me trusting him, because a convincing lie required a convincing reaction and the only way to get that was to not let me in on the performance. He had made himself my enemy to keep me alive. That's either the most calculated thing I've ever heard, I said slowly, or the most. It was calculated, he said. I won't pretend otherwise. But that doesn't mean, he stopped himself the same way he had in the kitchen last night. Doesn't mean what? He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city with his hands in his pockets. When I came back and announced the marriage, I told myself it was strategy. Keeping you close, giving Soo-hyun the right target to focus on, controlling the situation. A pause. By the time I was watching Park track your location last night I had stopped telling myself that. The room was very quiet. What were you telling yourself? I asked. He turned from the window. In the early morning light his face was open in a way I had never seen it, the careful control set aside for just a moment. That I should have found a different way, he said. One that didn't require you to spend 4 days believing I was the worst thing that had ever happened to you. Something warm and inconvenient moved through my chest. You were fairly convincing, I said. So were you. The ghost of something crossed his face. Your wedding vows were exceptional. I meant every word at the time. I know. He looked at me with an expression I didn't have a name for yet. Do you still? The question hung in the air between us. I thought about everything I'd felt in the past 4 days. The rage and grief and cold sharp purpose. The moment in the warehouse when he'd appeared through the smoke, and the first thing I'd felt before I could stop it was relief. The way he'd wrapped my wrists in the kitchen with hands that knew how to be gentle even though I'd never seen evidence of that before. No, I said finally. Not all of them. Something in his shoulders released. Just slightly. Good. He moved toward the door. Get dressed. Park laid out some clothes for you. We move in 2 hours. J1. He stopped. After this is over. I chose my words carefully. After Soo-hyun and Kwame and all of it. What happens to us? He turned back. For a long moment he just looked at me, this man who had walked back into a city carrying 15 years of carefully planned revenge and somewhere along the way had apparently picked up something he hadn't planned for at all. That depends entirely on you, he said. Then he walked out and left me sitting in the early morning light with my father's ring on one hand and his ring on the other, feeling, for the first time since I'd found my father's body, like the ground beneath me might actually be solid. 2 hours later we moved. Park's team hit the east side property at dawn, when the city was still gray and quiet. J1 went in first, the way he always seemed to go in first, like danger was simply a direction and he'd decided to walk toward it. I went in right behind him. Soo-hyun was at a table with Uncle Kwame and 2 men I recognized from my father's organization when we walked through the door. The scene froze for a full second like a photograph. Then Soo-hyun's eyes found mine and something moved across his face that I hadn't expected. Fear. Not of J1, though J1 was standing right there looking like the devil of Seoul had decided today was a good day to collect. No, Soo-hyun was looking at me. At whatever was in my face. Malia, he started. Don't. My voice came out steady and cold and completely my father's. I heard everything you said in that warehouse, Soo-hyun. Every word. You don't understand the full picture. My father was going to expose you, so you shot him 4 times in his study and left a black rose on his desk to frame your own brother. I took a step forward. I understand the picture perfectly. Kwame's face had gone the color of old ash. Malia, I want you to know I never intended. Save it for someone who cares. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on Soo-hyun. He glanced at J1, calculating, looking for the angle that might still save him. Whatever he told you, he began. He told me the truth, I said. Which is more than you ever did. Park's men moved in from the exits. The 2 men beside Soo-hyun reached for their weapons and thought better of it quickly. Soo-hyun stood slowly, straightening his jacket with a composure that almost impressed me. So what now? You hand me over to the authorities? To which ones exactly? Half the organizations in this city think J1 kidnapped you last night. We have evidence, J1 said. His voice was very calm. 3 months' worth. Communications, financial records, witness accounts. By this afternoon there won't be a room in this city where your name doesn't mean exactly what it is. For the first time, the composure cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. This was supposed to be mine, Soo-hyun said quietly, and in his voice I heard something that might have been grief if it hadn't been wrapped in so much ugliness. All of it. I built it. I earned it. You built it on my father's grave, I said. The silence that followed that was complete. Soo-hyun looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at his brother. Whatever he saw in J1's face made the last of the composure leave his. It didn't have to be this way, he said to J1. No, J1 agreed quietly. It didn't. Park moved in and it was over. Uncle Kwame was crying as they led him out. I watched him go and felt nothing except a hollow sadness for the man my father had trusted and the way trust could be such a quiet thing to destroy. Then it was just J1 and me standing in the gray morning light of an empty room. It's done, he said. I looked around at the space where Soo-hyun had built his careful empire of lies and felt the grief move through me, clean and uncomplicated for the first time since I'd found my father's body. No rage tangled up in it. No misdirected fury. Just loss. And underneath the loss, something that felt tentatively like the beginning of peace. Not quite, I said. Jae-won looked at me. My father killed yours. I met his eyes. I know the reasons and the history and all of it. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. For the 12-year-old boy who lost his father. Whatever came after, whatever it made both of them into, that part was wrong. He was very still. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I held his gaze. I want to. Something moved across his face, slow and deep, like a fault line shifting somewhere far below the surface. Your father, he said carefully, was not the only reason I came back. I waited. The 18-year-old girl at her birthday party who beat her cousin at chess and then pretended she hadn't so he wouldn't feel bad. The corner of his mouth moved. I came back for her too. I stared at him. You were at my 18th birthday party? Your father invited the Jang family as a show of good faith. A ceasefire gesture. He looked almost rueful. I stood in the corner for 3 hours telling myself I was there to assess the enemy and watched you run circles around everyone in that room. That was 7 years ago. Yes. You've been, I stopped. Started again. For 7 years? I told you. His voice was quiet. You've been mine since your 18th birthday. You just didn't know it. He'd said those same words in my bedroom before the wedding and they had made my skin crawl. Standing here now in the gray dawn with the truth laid out between us like a map, they landed completely differently. That's a long time to carry something, I said. It is. I looked at this man who had walked back into a city carrying equal measures of revenge and something more complicated, who had made himself my enemy to keep me breathing, who had wrapped my wrists in the kitchen at midnight with hands that already knew how to be careful with me. Jae-won. Yes. I'm still angry at you. I held his gaze. For not telling me. For letting me spend 4 days thinking you were the worst thing that ever happened to me. That's fair. And I think it's going to take me some time to unknow all the things I decided about you. Also fair. But. I took a breath. I'd like the time to do that. If you're offering it. The thing that had been almost an expression on his face for the past hour finally completed itself. It was not a large smile. It was quiet and careful and entirely real, and it changed his whole face into something I found I wanted to keep looking at. I'm offering it, he said. I nodded once. Then I walked past him toward the door and the gray morning and whatever came next. He fell into step beside me. And for the first time in 4 days, I didn't mind. 3 months later. Nairobi in the early morning was the most honest version of itself. Before the city woke up properly, before the noise and the movement and the relentless energy of it all kicked in, there was this quiet hour where the light came in gold and low and everything looked like it was being seen for the first time. I had started waking up early just to catch it. I stood on the balcony of the Jang residence with a cup of tea going cold in my hands, watching the city stretch itself awake below me. 3 months ago I had stood at a window in the Cruz estate and thought about cages. This balcony felt nothing like that. I was still deciding what it felt like. The door behind me opened quietly. I didn't turn around. I knew his footsteps by now, the particular unhurried weight of them. Jae-won came to stand beside me, his own cup of coffee in hand, and looked out at the city without saying anything. This was a thing I had learned about him in 3 months of careful, complicated proximity. He didn't fill silence for the sake of it. He was comfortable letting things exist without explaining them. I had found, somewhat to my surprise, that I was too. Park called, he said eventually. Already? Soo-hyun's hearing is confirmed for next week. The evidence is solid. 3 of the families he turned have flipped and agreed to testify. He took a sip of his coffee. It's over. I let that settle in the morning air. Over. 3 months of legal maneuvering and careful rebuilding and the quiet work of unknotting everything Soo-hyun had tangled. My mother had moved back into the Cruz estate last month, the extra security reduced now that the threat had a name and the name was behind bars. Uncle Kwame had confessed in full exchange for a reduced arrangement. 2 of my father's most senior men had been quietly retired. The organization was still standing. Smaller now, more careful, but standing. My mother asked about you, I said. What did she ask? Whether you were treating me well. I glanced at him sideways. I told her you were tolerable. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. High praise. I thought so. The city was brightening below us, the gold light deepening into the full warmth of morning. A week ago I had gone back to the Cruz estate for the first time since the wedding. I had walked through every room and felt my father in all of them, the particular weight of his absence in the spaces he used to fill. I had sat in his office for a long time with my hands in my lap and talked to him the way I hadn't let myself since the funeral. I had told him I understood now, about Hanjun Jiang, about the territory dispute and the decision he'd made and what it had cost. I had told him I wasn't sure I forgave it, but I was trying to understand it. I had told him about J1. I didn't know what he would have made of any of it. But I knew he would have wanted me to stop carrying the rage and start carrying something better. I was working on it. I want to visit his grave today, I said. J1 nodded. I'll drive you. You don't have to. I want to. He said it simply, the way he said most things that mattered. No elaboration, no performance. Just the fact of it placed down and left there. I had spent the first month after the truth looking for the catch. For the moment when the careful attentiveness would reveal itself as another layer of strategy, when the man who had planned everything down to the last detail would show me which part of this was also calculation. It never came. What came instead were small things. Coffee appearing on the kitchen counter at 7 in the morning before I was properly awake. A message from Park once when I was visiting my mother, telling me J1 had increased the security detail around the Cruz estate without being asked. The night I couldn't sleep and came downstairs to find him already in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, and instead of asking questions he had simply moved over and made room. Small things. But the kind that accumulated. Can I ask you something? I said. You don't usually ask permission. I'm being considerate. That's new. But his tone was warm. Ask. I turned to face him properly, leaning my hip against the balcony railing. He turned too, mirroring me, and in the full morning light I looked at the face I had memorized as the face of my enemy and thought about how completely a thing could change. The night at the warehouse, I said. When you came through that door. Before you locked everything away again, for just a second, I paused. What was that? He looked at me steadily. What do you think it was? I think it was relief. Yes. Why? Strategically, I was a piece you needed in play. You could have. Malia. His voice was quiet but stopped me completely. It stopped being strategy a long time before that night. How long? He looked out at the city for a moment. Then back at me. The morning of the wedding. When I walked into your room and you were standing there in that dress with your father's letter opener hidden in your garter and murder in your eyes. The corner of his mouth moved. I thought, she is going to be extraordinary. And then immediately thought, I have made a significant error in this plan. A sound escaped me. Genuine this time, warm and involuntary. Because? Because it is very difficult to maintain appropriate strategic distance from someone you find extraordinary. He said it with the same gravity he used for everything, which somehow made it funnier and more serious at the same time. I looked at him. This careful, complicated, infuriating man who had walked into my life at my father's funeral and turned everything upside down and somewhere in the wreckage of it had also, quietly, and without making a production of it, become the steadiest thing in it. J1. Yes. I need to tell you something. He waited. I spent 4 days wanting to destroy you, I said. And then I spent another month waiting to find the part of this that was still strategy. And then another month being quietly furious that there wasn't one because it would have been so much simpler. I held his gaze. And now I'm standing here on this balcony 3 months into a marriage that started as a trap and thinking about how my mother asked if you were treating me well, and the honest answer is that you are. You have been. Consistently and without requiring anything from me in return. His expression was very still and very attentive. I'm not good at this, I continued. I grew up in a world where everything meant something else and nothing was straightforward and love was either a weapon or a weakness. I don't have a clean template for whatever this is. Neither do I, he said quietly. But I think I stopped. Took a breath. Started again. I think I'm done waiting for the catch. I think whatever this is, I want to find out what it becomes. The morning light was fully gold now, warm and unhurried across both our faces. Jae-won set his coffee cup on the railing and reached out slowly, giving me every opportunity to step back. When I didn't, his hand came up to my face the way it had that first day at the funeral, but nothing like that day at all. For the record, he said, there is no catch. I know, I said. That's what I'm telling you. When he kissed me this time it was nothing like the wedding. No claiming, no performance, no audience. It was quiet and unhurried and entirely real, the kind of kiss that wasn't trying to prove anything. I kissed him back the same way. When we pulled apart the city was fully awake below us, noise and movement and life going on in every direction. My father's grave, I said. Will you come in with me? Not wait outside. He understood what I was asking. Not just a driver. Something else. Yes, he said. I nodded and turned back to the view with his shoulder warm against mine, my cold tea in my hands, the morning doing what mornings do. I thought about the girl who had stood at a closed coffin 4 months ago burning with grief and rage and the absolute certainty that she knew exactly who her enemy was. She hadn't been wrong to be angry. She'd just been pointing it in the wrong direction. I thought about my father. About the chess games and the hot chocolate and the empire he'd built and the boy he'd made into an enemy and the long tangled chain of consequences that had led here, to this balcony, to this morning, to this man standing beside me like he had decided this was where he was supposed to be and saw no reason to argue with it. Papa, I thought, I'm going to be okay. And for the first time since I'd found him, I believed it. Inside the residence, somewhere, a phone rang and the day began properly. There would be meetings and decisions and the ongoing work of rebuilding. There would be Soo-hyun's hearing and the final legal untangling and 100 things requiring attention. But right now there was just the morning and the city and Jae-won's shoulder against mine. I finished my cold tea and decided that was enough.